Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Minimum wage in California is $16 an hour, and in the city of San Diego, it's $16.85. But a new study found a rise in minimum wage violations in major cities in California. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne says San Diego was one of them.
When grocery stores close, workers like Alejandro Quesada go in to clean and sanitize the empty supermarkets. He did this for 2 years in San Diego until enough was enough.
Era un batallar de estar esperando que pagaran, pues a veces que llegaba el cajero y pues no había dinero, no.
He says there were times he wouldn't get paid on time for his work. He wouldn't get meals or breaks, and often had to pay for materials out of pocket. The cleaning company he worked for was based out of Arizona, so getting hold of HR was difficult.
Pero pues nunca nos pagaron, pues. Sí, apenas nos pagaban.
He says he never got reimbursed for material or unpaid wages, but has now moved on to a different job he enjoys. Quesada is one of the many workers in California that has been a victim of wage theft. A study conducted by Rutgers University found minimum wage theft violations more than doubled over a decade, affecting as many as 1.5 million workers in 4 major cities in California, including San Diego, meaning some employers are still paying less than the mandated minimum wage.
We estimate between $2.3 and $4.6 billion is being stolen from workers annually, just in terms of minimum wage theft, meaning being paid underneath the statutory minimum wage that they're owed, whether that's a local rate or the California state rate.
Jake Barnes is with the Workplace Justice Lab at Rutgers University. He says the study found workers who were paid less than the minimum wage lost on average about $4,000, or 20% of their total paycheck per year. Barnes said some of the workers more likely to fall victim to wage theft are private household domestic workers, such as groundskeepers, child care providers, and cleaners.
These workers are across the board, for the most part, being paid or being experiencing minimum wage violations at much higher rates, really, than most other workers.
He adds these are jobs often filled by people of color, women, or people who have less than a college education.
Other sectors where this is particularly prominent is food services and drinking places. So restaurants, fast food, which of course this is a huge sector, so very important to account for.
Barnes says that in many ways, California is a leader in labor practices. But the study shows that more support is needed in local and state wage enforcement. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
The latest inflation reports are a mix of good and bad news. One set of numbers, which measures how much manufacturers pay to suppliers, shows prices have gone up to their highest level in a year. But the latest consumer price index shows overall inflation cooled in April, providing a bit of hope. Jen Sullivan breaks down the numbers and what they mean for your wallet.
When it comes to inflation numbers, there is both good and bad news in reports released this week. Wholesale inflation, which is measured by the Producer Price Index, ticked up in April to its highest rate in a year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That measures the change in prices manufacturers pay to suppliers. Experts say when suppliers charge more, that increase is passed to consumers. On Tuesday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell, speaking at the Foreign Bankers Association in the Netherlands, expressed concerns.
We did not expect this to be a smooth road, but these were higher than I think anybody expected.
Part of the reason these numbers rose was because energy costs jumped up 2% in April, and that helped push the price of some goods higher. Powell also indicated that these numbers justified keeping interest rates elevated for now.
What that has told us is that we'll need to be patient and let restrictive policy do its work.
But there is some positive news. The latest Consumer Price Index report released Wednesday shows inflation cooled slightly in April. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, consumer prices were up 3.4% for the 12 months ending in April, slowing from 3.5% the month before. Housing and gas costs remain high, but grocery prices fell 0.2% from March. The other good news is wages are outpacing inflation, helping workers compensate for higher prices.
Real wages are now positive, and unemployment has been below 4% for 27 consecutive months.
For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
2 months ago, San Diego Unified called for the elimination of hundreds of district jobs, and today those layoffs are expected to be finalized. According to the Union Tribune, layoffs were set to be finalized on or before today, May 15th. The potential layoffs come after the district faced a huge budget deficit of $94 million. A district spokesperson told our media partner KGTV the district is still, quote, analyzing the numbers and assessing the numbers from attrition. Qualified San Diego Unified School District graduating students now have a guaranteed spot at Cal State San Marcos. The partnership approved by the SDUSD Board of Education on Tuesday will include college prep services for students and families starting in middle school. Graduating students will have to meet certain criteria to qualify, which includes a cumulative GPA of 3.0 or higher. The class of 2025 will be eligible to apply for admission to CSUSM. The Pentagon continues to struggle implementing regulations and reforms on how it handles sexual assault and harassment. And that is according to a pair of recent reports from its Inspector General. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer spoke to one advocate about why the problem persists.
For more than a decade, Josh Connolly was the chief of staff for former California Representative Jackie Speer. Speer introduced several reforms, most notably those that took decisions about sexual assault cases out of the hands of military commanders.
This is really a cultural, toxic culture problem, and one fix as big and change as big as that is and was isn't going to necessarily fix the problem.
A pair of recent Pentagon Inspector General reports describe other issues. One says that about half the time, the military is failing to quickly transfer victims of sexual assaults to other units. The other found problems with how the Navy and Marine Corps document and track harassment complaints. Connolly is now the vice president of Protect Our Defenders, a nonprofit human rights organization focused on the military justice system. He says both reports highlight glaring deficiencies in how the services are handling the reforms.
There is no ambiguity as to what the law is, nor ambiguity as to whether they being the military followed that law, and the answer is no, they did not.
He says the reports substantiate his view that the military has a culture problem.
It's stories like this and these two reports that highlight the lack of seriousness and rigor that the various services are handling this issue.
The acting Undersecretary of Defense wrote in response that circumstances around each transfer are different and there are legitimate reasons for some delays. In their responses, the Navy and Marine Corps say all their harassment and assault procedures are currently being overhauled. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Biden and former President Trump agree to debate. Plus, a look at the latest key primary results. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Few populations suffered more during the COVID pandemic than residents of nursing homes. Most were shut off from the outside world, and some died without family by their side. Now, a new bill in the California legislature aims to prevent that from happening during future public health emergencies.
I don't know. I think you're feeling a little sad today, huh? Yes, very sad. Oh, Mama.
It was the darkest of times for Gabrielle, a resident of a nursing home in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains. Each dawn during the pandemic brought another day of loneliness and anxiety. The pain is still fresh for her daughter, Denise Bogan.
She was having feelings of that she had been forgotten
She was having feelings of being abandoned, and sometimes she would cry. And it was completely traumatic.
The lockdowns were, for the most part, a failure.
Tony Chicatel is with the California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform. He had argued with government health agencies, saying they were neglecting an obvious truth.
That visitors provide just as much support, if not in some cases more support, to the well-being of long-term care facility residents than the paid staff.
Chicatel is among the sponsors of the Resident Access Protection Act. He says the bill authored by San Diego Assemblyman David Alvarez is vital protection for long-term care nursing home patients.
Halting visitation rights for our loved ones in long-term care facilities has a major impact on their mental health and their physical well-being.
The proposed solution?
The right to in-person, on-site access to visitors during a public health emergency, as long as they follow the same safety protocols that are outlined by public health officials and required by staff.
Similar legislation was proposed in 2022. However, powerful state health officials blocked it. The new bill also faces opposition as it heads to its next hurdle, the Appropriations Committee on May 15th.
We don't know what the next pandemic will potentially bring, and the bill as written will impair our ability to respond.
Dr. Cameron Kaiser represents the Health Officers Association of California. He agrees patient access is important, but mandating it by law will hamstring public health efforts.
Such language, of course, often has unintended consequences. During an emergency, it is impossible to predict what steps may be necessary to take, and we never take lightly any step that impairs public activity lightly.
Advocates say the cost of doing nothing is much higher. They point to a study of the pandemic's impacts on nursing home residents released last October.
The visitation might have been allowed on paper, but it wasn't happening.
The study revealed prolonged shutdowns led to residents experiencing cognitive impairment, severe feelings of isolation, malnutrition, and depression. It concludes a new approach is needed during any declared state of emergency.
Not allowing me in and not allowing me to speak with her.
Lynn Diedrich says she knows firsthand why change is necessary. Her mother, Petey, resided in an Encinitas nursing home.
She had Alzheimer's and she couldn't remember about the pandemic, and she thought I had forgotten about her.
Without the familiar routine, Petey spiraled.
And when all of a sudden I didn't come anymore, I think she thought she had done something wrong.
Somebody will come and get me and take me home.
Gabrielle suffered a particularly cruel fate. Her family couldn't visit her as a precaution against COVID. But she ended up dying in the home after catching it from a member of the nursing home staff.
And public health didn't understand that staff in these situations are actually more dangerous than visitors because the staff go from resident to resident to resident throughout the day, whereas visitors just come and see their one resident.
Alvarez's bill would mandate a designated person access to a patient's room.
Nobody should have those last weeks or months of their loved one's life stolen from them. And so this just shouldn't happen ever again.
Reported and written by KPBS freelance reporter J.W. August. From protests to picket lines, the fight for Palestinians on college campuses is now a matter for the UAW. And late this afternoon, academic workers on all University of California campuses are voting on whether to authorize a historic strike. And KPBS education reporter MG Perez joins us live from the newsroom to tell us more about the union's plans. MG.
Maya, the UAW 4811 covers more than 48,000 academic workers across the state, including UC San Diego. This is not a strike about more money. It is a vote of confidence to support union members and their right to free speech. Many of them participated in recent protests and encampments for Palestinians, calling for an end to the Israel-Hamas war.
We believe that this is an important fight, an essential fight for our union to take on.
Ani Valoria Winnett is the unit chair for the UAW 4811 based at UCLA. She and her colleagues experienced many of the protests and much of the violence that erupted there.
Without the right to protest, without freedom of speech, we wouldn't be able to fight in our own campuses for what we know to be better working conditions. So we see this as connected to our ability to advance as a union, even though it's not a contract in particular that we're talking about.
A week later, the encampment at UC San Diego was torn down by law enforcement, and more than 60 arrests were made. Some of those who participated were UAW union members, including academic researchers, postdoctoral scholars, and graduate student workers. This kind of scene played out on several UC campuses in the fight to support Palestinians.
Without the right to protest, without freedom of speech, we wouldn't be able to fight in our own campuses for what we know to be better working conditions. So we see this as connected to our ability to advance as a union, even though it's not a contract in particular that we're talking about.
The UAW's top demands include amnesty for all academic employees, students, faculty, and staff who face disciplinary action or arrest due to protest, the right to free speech and political expression on campus, and divestment from all UC financial interests supporting Israel's military response in Gaza. The University of California says it acknowledges the issues about the ongoing war, but UC believes that the vote currently being conducted by UAW leadership sets a dangerous precedent that would introduce non-labor issues into labor agreements. The UC's written statement also says the UC understands and embraces its role as a forum for free speech, lawful protests, and public debate. However, given that role, these non-work-related disputes cannot prevent it from fulfilling its academic mission. And these issues fall outside the scope of negotiation for employment and the implementation of existing labor contracts.
We have constant underground organizing where we meet with department leaders, we meet with workers, and we gather from them what it is that it's going to take for us to be strike ready and ready to put up a good fight.
We are still waiting for the results, and we will keep you posted. If it passes, the plan is to hold a stand-up strike modeled after their fellow United Auto Workers, which limits work stoppages to select UC campuses chosen by the UAW Executive Board. No word on when it would begin. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Billions of dollars of new state funding to address homelessness, behavioral health, and substance abuse will soon be available to local governments and nonprofits. Governor Newsom announced $3.3 billion created by Proposition 1 will be available by July ahead of schedule. The money will be used to expedite construction of behavioral health treatment facilities across the state.
I've never been more enthusiastic about our prospects to actually make a dent and address the issue of what's happening on the streets and sidewalks in this state than I am today. These next 2 to 3 years will be transformational. We're at a hinge moment. We've addressed a lot of the barriers, a lot of the issues that we have struggled with for decades in the state of California, the inability to do certain things. We've met the moment.
Prop 1 was narrowly approved by voters in the March primary, and currently the state has an inventory of 5,500 behavioral health beds. It needs around 8,000 more units to treat mental health and addiction. We may see compassion as a value that must be taught, but neuroscientists say humans are hardwired to understand the feelings and needs of the other. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge tells of a place where those neural networks are researched and where medical professionals learn to make the most of them.
It looks like a dance party, but this is fellowship training at the Sanford Institute for Empathy and Compassion at UC San Diego. The folks out on the floor are medical professionals. And why are these doctors dancing?
We use arts and humanities-based curriculum to teach listening and connection, team building, and through that comes empathy and wellness is what we're finding through our research.
Just down the hall from the fellowship class, Institute Director Bill Mobley works beneath a large portrait of the Dalai Lama in his office. That powerful symbol of empathy and compassion illustrates what Mobley calls the primary focus of their training, understanding the other.
To be comfortable enough to see the other. To be non-judgmental enough to see the other.
And this ability to feel another person's pain or comfort isn't just in the lessons we learn. Mobley says we're hardwired to feel them.
It's in the brain. We know it's in the brain. Empathy and compassion are as much a part of brain function as listening and hearing and vision. And, motor function. I mean, it's in the brain. It's right there for us to understand and explore, and hopefully right there for us to understand well enough that we can devise training programs that really make it easier for us to learn how to be skillful in our empathy.
With the use of brain imaging, neuroscientists like Mobley have identified the neural circuit that creates feelings of empathy.
And another circuit that's linked to that has the willingness not only to understand the distress of another, but to care for another. That's compassion. So they're separate circuits.
Along with the Institute's fellowship programs, their training in empathy and compassion are also part of the UCSD med school curriculum. Those senses may come naturally, but they can be forgotten when you're dealing with frightened or frustrated patients. In this UCSD-produced video, emergency room doctor Rachna Subramani gives an example of patients waiting for hours in a hallway to see a doctor. Used to be she didn't want to address it, but her ways have changed.
I just go straight to the patient and I say, I'm so sorry for your wait. I'm sorry you're in the hallway. This is not the care I want for myself or my loved ones. And that alone has made such a difference, just acknowledging it.
Physician burnout and suicide are also at the center of the Institute's mission and training. They say to be compassionate to patients, you need to be compassionate to yourself. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Well, the onshore flow will be present over the course of the next couple of days. And what does that mean? More low cloudiness, especially near the coastline for tonight. But even some of the interior valleys will experience some cloud coverage for a time late tonight into early tomorrow morning. Temperature-wise, dropping down to 60 at Oceanside and Chula Vista. Ramona down to 55 degrees. And again, into the mid-60s here toward Borrego Springs and Mount Laguna, dipping down to 53. But you can see that ribbon of cloudiness along the shoreline, but even towards some of the interior valleys here during the early morning hours, that will erode. But those clouds are going to be tough to work their way out of the immediate coast here, even as we venture our way into the afternoon. And then you'll see as we work our way into the evening, those low clouds again begin to slide their way a little bit further inland. So again, the sunshine and the core of the warmth here is going to be well off toward the east, but there will be some subtle warming over the course of the next couple of days. Temperature-wise, mid to upper 90s around Borrego Springs. I'm talking upper 60s toward Oceanside and Chula Vista. Ramona topping off at 72 degrees. Let's take you down the road here at the coast, and numbers here going to kind of stay put due to the low cloudiness in place, especially as we work our way here through the upcoming weekend. Overnight lows stay put into the 50s. As we take a look at the interior valleys, there will be a slight increase here in the temperature, going up into the mid-70s on Saturday and then falling back down here with more low cloudiness by early next week. Over the mountainous locations, we'll also see mostly sunny skies the next couple of days. Some breezes on Saturday and then a little bit cooler here as we head our way into Sunday and also early next week. For desert locations, warmest air the next couple of days. We'll notice some breezes over the weekend and a little cooler as we head our way into Monday of next week with highs in the 80s. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
The month of May is Bike Month, and tomorrow is Bike Anywhere Day. And as KPBS reporter Melissa May shows us, there are perks for anyone who trades in 4 wheels for 2, even for a short ride.
Bike Anywhere Day organizers at Sandag have a goal of at least 10,000 participants.
So what we'd like to do is encourage people not to just look at the commute. The commute might be too long for them, but maybe it's riding with their child to school. Maybe it's just going to the market or something else that's nearby and easily accessible.
Sandag's Deputy Director of Mobility Planning, Jennifer Williamson, says over 100 pit stops will be open around the county from 7 to 10 a.m. Participants can get a free T-shirt, bike safety equipment, and refreshments.
We're just trying to encourage people that this is a viable transportation option.
Williamson says for the first time, Sandag is partnering with schools to encourage kids to get out and ride.
And we have some various pit stops at schools for kids to participate in. And not only just for the kids, but their parents to realize that it's a good option for them to get their kids to school too.
San Diego County Bike Coalition is hosting a pit stop at their downtown office.
The theme is Follow the Yellow Brick Bike Path. So we'll be extending this yellow brick road into a bike path that goes from our office to the J Street cycle track.
Chloe Lauer is the coalition's executive director.
We find that community is really key to making biking enjoyable, mainstream, and safe. The more people who are out on the road, the more that drivers get used to sharing the road.
If you haven't ridden your bike in a while, Lauer recommends following your ABCs.
Make sure that your air is checked in your tire, your brakes are checked, your gear shaft and chain are in good shape.
Wear a helmet and make sure it fits properly.
And then 2 fingers here between your eyebrows and the top of the helmet.
And start local before heading out for longer rides.
Taking a loop around your neighborhood before you go, 10 or more miles.
Lauer says Bike Anywhere Day is also about raising awareness for making the region safer for cyclists.
6% of our roadways are where 54% of the incidents, serious injuries, and fatalities happen. So if we could fix just a fraction of our roadways, only 6%, we could cut those fatalities and serious injuries in half.
If you can't participate in Bike Anywhere Day, Sandag is also hosting a Bike Local Day this Saturday, May 18th, where people are encouraged to bike within their communities and take advantage of promotions at local participating businesses. Melissa May, KPBS News.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.